This is a user demo of my app Trashify. All right. So what I've did is I worked on the authentication using not next-auth, and this authentication system that I built, I'm going to be repurposing into some of my other projects, such as Spell It. And also, we're going to be relaunching Everyone's STEM. So I'm going to probably use this authentication system for that, but I'm just going to add role-based access control to it. Anyways, here it is. All right. So what I'm doing here is I'm building in public. So I'm going to give some updates on this app that I call Trashify. And here's the sign in completely done. For those who don't know, Trashify is an app where you can find bins and like trash near you, so you can go ahead and clean it up. All right. It's just a simple pet project that I built, and it will use, I believe, the church scroll. I can't pronounce it, but it's going to use this algorithm to find a trash can near you. All right. So let's go ahead and start this demo. Before we do that, I'm using session-based authentication with next-auth. All right. And basically what that is this diagram over here. I'm going to go ahead and explain it to you. So a client will send login details to the server. Okay, in this case, I'm using mongodb and prisma for my ORM, right, to modify the data. Anyways, we're going to send our username and password. In this case, we're just sending our Google credentials. All right. And then what's going to happen is the server is going to see if this username and password, in this case my Google credentials, match up with anything. In this case, I have an account over here, right, that gets built if you don't have already logged in. All right, because Google takes care of the other authentication for us. So we just need to see if a user is already logged in. So for that, we just check if there is a document for them in accounts. If not, we build them one. All right, that's our logic. After that, what happens is the server sends a session ID to cookies. So what happens is, while this happens, right, while this login process happens, the server saves session data into memory. That is this over here. That is this database over here, session. In this case, nothing is here because I have logged out. So it creates a session in memory and it just sends that to cookies. All right. And so it would send it as an HTTP only cookie, so it's safe from scripting attacks. Because what hackers do is they take JavaScript and they inject it into the victim's computer to get this type of data if the cookie is not HTML only. Anyways, as soon as it's sent, right, the client will automatically save it in their machine, right? Over here, it's saved usually. So if I go to application, in cookies, it's saved over here, and then you can even see if it's HTTP only, right? And so yeah, so this is where it's saved, right? And then what happens is in every subsequent request, the session ID from the cookie, which we'll see as soon as I log in, will be sent to the server, and then the server will compare it with the session ID that it has in its database. All right. And then if everything is good, it will send that request back. In this case, in this example, it's saying get user profile and then send the user profile in success. But it could be applicable to any API request that you make that needs to be authenticated. All right, now that we have a practical understanding of what session-based authentication is, let's look at a real-world implementation of it. Okay, I'm just gonna, there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna sign in, right? I'm gonna use my Google account, just press continue, right? And boom. As soon as I do that, I didn't put any logic that stops users from logging in if they've already signed in. I'm probably gonna implement that soon as well. But anyways, as you can see, I can access my home page. I can also access an API route that I created. So let me go to API/create here. As you can see, it just says top secret message for now. I just need to test if the auth works. But if you look over here, if you would notice, I get a session back and it has a value. Okay. And as you can see, it says session token. Now what happens here is if I go ahead and refresh this, because MongoDB is in real time, but if you look over here, you'll see that I actually have a session over here. And in this case, it stores a user ID. So that's another thing about sessions. So when we're saving a session data, we're saving the user's data as well in that session. All right. And in this case, we are saving the user ID, as you can see here. And this is the session ID. And as you can see, it's the same one. So D4C, right? So we're just comparing, and D4C. As you can see, it's the same one that's stored in this cookie. And as you can see, it's also HTTP only as well. And that just means that it comes from a server, right? In this case, it's going to be from the next-auth handlers. And so it just comes from the server, and it's only accessible by through a request. All right. So that is the whole inner working of the API for authentication. Now, what I can do is I can also sign out. So when I sign out now, let me go to application here. When I press this, as you can see, it takes away that session token. And then if I go back to my MongoDB database, I refresh this. As you can see, there's no queries. There's no sessions. All right. So now if I try to access API/create, you'll see that it says authentication failed. And if I try to access the home page, it'll redirect me back to sign in. I also have an about page, and it'll also redirect me to the sign in. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the code. All right. All right, so here's the code, okay? And so I use the next-auth handler, as you can see. And in the options, I just added the session as database, and then I added some extra options as well, like how long a session will need to expire. And this just happens if a session is not used in a request, because as you can see, this frequently changes the age. All right. So the session stays the same as long as you keep using the session, or else in 30 days it'll go away. It'll expire. All right. In this case, we're just checking if the Google provider that I'm using, right, if that profile has an email. If it doesn't, then that means that there is no profile, something wrong happened, right? So we just throw a new error just saying no profile. All right. And then we're also generating a random UUID for the session token itself, right? Because we need a session ID or token. As you can see over here, whoops. As you can see over here, you need a session ID or token. The same thing. All right, and then we're just changing the pages because by default the pages look pretty bad in my opinion, and I don't really want them to kind of look tacky. But they do build pages for you. But in my case, I just made my own. All right, and they are over here. As you can see, I'm using Tailwind for styling. All right, and then you can also go to, I'm gonna need to delete this components. I don't need it. Okay, and then if we go to lib, you'll see that there's an auth.ts. This just checks. This is just like a helper function, you can say, to check if these pages and APIs are authenticated or not. So we just get the session from get server session. This is given by next-auth, right? So it takes care of like literally all the auth for us. And then we're just checking if the session, if there isn't a session, right? And if there isn't, we're throwing a new error just saying authentication failed. And as you can see, this is the message that we get in API/create. As you can see, it's the same message, right? Because it's getting it from this helper function. For a client, it's a bit different, right? Because in Next.js, there are server components and client components, but like if you want a component to have interactivities like clicking and buttons and stuff like that, you need to make sure it's a client. So I have logic for when the component is a client, and that's just simply using get session. This is for a client. And then if there isn't a session, we're just going to redirect them because it's like a UI. It's like more front end. So it doesn't really make sense for me to throw an error like this. All right. And then let's look at the API. Let's go to create, and you'll actually see that we're doing a try catch block, and then we're just adding the error.message. So that's why we're able to see the error itself. All right, because this is an error, and then we're just catching it from over here to the try catch block, and then we're just giving the message of error. I can actually make this error as well instead to just show you that it's from that code itself. And if I refresh this, as you can see, it says error. All right. So that's the basic rundown of my code over here. One more thing before I end off. When you actually go to like this page, for example, right, you'll actually see that I'm actually just calling the helper function like this. That's all you need to do. There's nothing else that you need to do. As soon as you call this, it does everything for you. All right. Same thing with the home pages and stuff. We just need to put it in a use effect so it only runs once, and then we just need to call it. That's it. All right, that's it, and it takes care of all of our auth for us. All right. So yeah, that is my authentication completely done. It's very secure. Because I'm using next-auth, right? But next-auth made it really easy and painless to create this. But yeah, I definitely recommend that you guys try out next-auth. Just one thing, make sure you understand the authentication process, all right? So make sure you understand that, the relationship between the client and the server and the session that is stored in the database itself, all right? If you understand that, then you're good to go.